The slap that changed everything, she got slapped mid-slight for not belonging, then revealed she owned the entire airline. They say money talks, but sometimes silence says more, especially when that silence is paired with side eyes, fake smiles, and assumptions that hit like bricks. It was a cool morning in Portland, Oregon, private tarmac, light breeze. A sleek Gulfstream G650 sat polished and still, ready for its cross-country flight to Boston Logan International. The crew was already on board, prepping for a quick exclusive hop east, and then she arrived. No red carpet, no security detail, no designer luggage. Just a woman in her early 40s, sneakers, wearing black joggers, a faded hoodie, and beat-up Adidas sneakers. She was scrolling on her phone, her afro pulled into a loose puff, calm, unbothered. Her name, Dr. Simone J. Grant, but nobody said her name out loud, not yet. Rebecca Lawson, the lead flight attendant, spotted her from inside the cabin. She leaned slightly over to the co-pilot and asked with a raised brow, "Do we have a last-minute passenger that ops didn't clear?" He shook his head. "Not that I know of." Rebecca's lips pursed, her instincts already buzzing with suspicion. Simone stepped into the plane like she'd done it 100 times before. Not flashy, just familiar. Rebecca was already halfway down the aisle to meet her. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said with a voice dipped in sugary authority. "This jet is reserved for a private charter." Simone barely looked up from her phone. "I know." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge, a quiet defiance, that made Rebecca's smile tighten. "I'm not sure you do," Rebecca said, standing firm in the aisle. "This is Flight 419 to Boston, chartered by SkyPulse Aviation for a confidential client." Simone tucked her phone into her hoodie pocket and looked her in the eye. "I'm the client." Rebecca didn't laugh, but you could see the smirk trying to escape, right? "Do you have some kind of confirmation? Because I don't." "You don't need my confirmation," Simone said, her tone steady but sharp. "Check your manifest." "Hey, Rebecca," another flight attendant called from the galley, a younger guy, probably late 20s. "She's on the manifest, top of the list." Rebecca froze, lips parting just slightly, her face flushed, a mix of embarrassment and defiance. "I see." Simone walked past her slowly, not in a smug way, just like someone who's tired of this exact moment playing on repeat. She didn't say anything, but the air shifted, you could feel it. But Rebecca wasn't done. She whispered to the other flight attendant, "Something's not right. There's no way she's who she says she is." Her voice was low, but it carried, and Simone's head tilted slightly, catching every word. But if Rebecca had just sat down and done her job, this story would have ended right here. Instead, she made a choice. Rebecca couldn't sit with it. She watched Simone place her carry-on in the overhead, then sink into the cream leather seat like she owned the place, legs crossed, eyes back on her phone, minding her business. That bothered Rebecca. She clenched her fists, her mind racing with assumptions she couldn't shake. The rest of the cabin was empty, minus a discreet older couple seated toward the back. Guests of the same charter, both heads in newspapers. The engines hadn't started yet, there was still time. Rebecca straightened her skirt, took a breath, and approached again, this time leaning slightly over Simone's seat. "Ma'am, I need to ask again," she said, voice flatter now, less sweet. "Do you have identification? I just want to verify something." Simone looked up slowly. "Is there a reason I'm being asked twice when your colleague already confirmed I'm on the list?" Her eyes locked onto Rebecca's, unflinching, daring her to justify herself. Rebecca didn't flinch. "Standard protocol." "No, it's not." Simone's tone wasn't raised, but it was sharp, precise. It cut the air clean in half. "I've flown SkyPulse 14 times this year," she continued. "I don't remember standard protocol involving being interrogated while boarding my own plane." The younger attendant, whose name tag read Ethan, called from the galley again. "Rebecca, we're good. Everything's cleared. Ground team just confirmed. Let it go." But she didn't. She moved closer, voice lower. "Look, I'm trying to protect our clients. This plane is chartered under a high-security clearance. We don't get people showing up in sweats and hoodies without it raising red flags." Simone blinked. So, the problem is my clothes. Her voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made Rebecca's posture stiffen. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. There was a pause. And then Rebecca took one more step. I don't know who you think you are, but this kind of entitlement doesn't fly here. This is a professional environment. Simone stood up now, eye to eye, taller than Rebecca by maybe 2 inches, calm, composed, but now fully present in the moment. I didn't think I was anybody. You did, she said. You decided I didn't belong the second I walked in, didn't you? Ethan stepped forward, finally placing himself between the two women. Let's dial it back. All right, we've got clearance. Let's just... But Rebecca wasn't hearing it. She looked past him straight at Simone. You can either show me who you really are, or you can wait outside while we sort this out. You're not sorting anything, Simone said, her voice low but cutting. You're escalating a problem you created. And then Rebecca did something that changed everything. She reached for Simone's arm. Not rough, but forceful, like she was trying to escort her out. Simone pulled back, gently but firmly. Don't touch me. That should have ended it, but Rebecca's ego was louder than her training. She took another step and muttered under her breath, I'm not doing this today. Then she slapped her hard, right across the face. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't drawn out. Just one sharp, open-handed hit. Enough to turn heads. Enough to make time stop. Ethan gasped. The older couple looked up in disbelief. And Simone, she didn't yell, didn't retaliate. She just stood there, one hand to her cheek as the echo of that moment settled into everyone's chest. Her eyes burned with a quiet fury, but her face remained still, a mask of control that was more terrifying than any outburst. Ethan was the first to speak. What the hell are you doing? I was trying to get her to leave, Rebecca stammered. Her voice shook, her hands trembling as she realized the line she'd crossed. She owns the plane, Ethan snapped. Rebecca blinked. What? She's Dr. Simone Grant, he said, the new CEO of Aerotech Solutions. She's the majority stakeholder in Skypulse. This is her jet. And just like that, the balance of power flipped. But the damage was already done. Rebecca's face drained of color. The words hit her like turbulence she hadn't seen coming. She's the CEO. Ethan nodded slowly, still staring at her like he couldn't believe what just happened. You didn't just mess up, Rebecca. You assaulted the woman who could end your career with a single phone call. Yeah, Simone Grant, PhD in mechanical engineering, net worth north of $3 billion, 0 cents. You just laid hands on the woman who owns the company that signs your paychecks. Rebecca opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the armrest to steady herself. Simone still hadn't moved. Her hand was down now. Her cheek was red, but her expression was unreadable, steady, distant, almost surgical, like a scientist taking notes on an emotional experiment she was no longer participating in. You assaulted a passenger, Ethan said, voice tight. You assaulted the owner. You need to sit down right now. Rebecca's eyes flicked around the cabin looking for backup that wasn't coming. The older couple had gone back to pretending to read, but their hands trembled with every page turn. The co-pilot had come out quietly, standing near the cockpit door, arms crossed. Simone turned and calmly walked back to her seat. She sat down slowly, smoothed her hoodie, and pulled her phone from her pocket again, not to call anyone, just to scroll. It was so ordinary it felt like whiplash. Ethan leaned toward her, voice quiet. Do you want to delay the flight? We can report it. Escalate to... No, Simone said simply. We're flying. Ethan glanced toward Rebecca. She should be removed. Simone didn't look up. No, let her stay. That surprised everyone. You sure? She's going to sit on this flight like she didn't just make the biggest mistake of her career, Simone said. Let her feel every second of what she's done. Ethan gave a tight nod. The engines began to roar softly as the pilots started their pre-flight checks. Ethan returned to the galley, his body stiff. Rebecca stayed frozen near the front for a few seconds longer before she quietly took her jump seat. Nobody said another word. No one apologized. No one asked if Simone was okay. It was just silence, but it wasn't peace. It was pressure. Heavy, pressing against everyone's lungs. The plane lifted off 25 minutes later, smooth and flawless. Rebecca fumbled through the safety announcements with a voice that cracked twice. Nobody corrected her. Nobody cared. Simone sat, legs crossed, head tilted back against the headrest, eyes closed. Not asleep, just thinking. Her fingers traced the edge of her phone, her mind clearly calculating what would come next. She didn't need revenge. She already had something stronger, patience. But high up in the clouds, every second of that silence was a countdown. 40 minutes into the flight, not a single word had been spoken between Simone and Rebecca. Rebecca sat rigid in her jump seat near the galley, fidgeting with the strap of her apron, occasionally glancing up to check if anyone was watching. No one was, but she couldn't shake the weight of what she'd done. Every time she blinked, she saw the look in Simone's eyes, that cold restraint, that silence louder than any yelling could have been. Her stomach churned, her mind replaying the slap, the sound, the moment she lost control. Ethan made himself busy. Too busy, folding napkins that didn't need folding, rechecking inventory, refilling a water bottle that was already full. The older couple in the back whispered softly to each other, shooting glances toward the front of the cabin, wondering what kind of drama they'd just paid first-class money to witness. And Simone? She was still. She hadn't moved much since takeoff. At one point, she pulled out a leather notebook and scribbled something with a black pen. Not fast, just one line. Then closed it again. Then nothing. It was driving Rebecca crazy. She stood suddenly and walked toward her with fake composure. "Would you like anything to drink?" she asked. Simone looked up. There was no anger in her face, no attitude. Just a long pause before she answered. "Do you think I want something from your hands?" Rebecca flinched. "I just thought I should offer. You thought you could slap me, then bring me sparkling water and think we're square?" "I wasn't thinking," Rebecca blurted, her voice breaking. I messed up." Rebecca's voice shrank. "I didn't mean to. You did exactly what you meant to do. The problem is, you thought I couldn't respond." That silence came again, thicker this time. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said, barely audible. "Mine? I didn't know who you were." Simone tilted her head, voice calm. "What if I was nobody? What if I was just someone flying private for the first time? What if I didn't have a billion-dollar company behind me?" She let that hang in the air for a moment. "You weren't sorry when you thought I was powerless," she continued. "You're only sorry now that you think you'll lose something." Rebecca's eyes dropped. Tears welled, but she blinked them back, her voice barely a whisper. "You're right, I know." Simone turned her head toward the window. Rebecca walked back without another word. Ethan raised an eyebrow as she passed, whispering, "What did you think was going to happen?" "I don't know," she murmured. "You know that whole plane has cameras, right?" he added. "Every inch, including the cabin." "It's already recorded." She blinked. "I forgot." Ethan shook his head and returned to the galley. The conversation was over. Simone sat back, pressing a finger against her cheek for a moment, right where she'd been hit. It didn't hurt anymore, but the bruise wouldn't be physical. It would be policy. Because once they landed, things wouldn't just go back to normal. They'd go exactly the way Simone wanted them to. The plane flew steady at 41,000 feet, but the cabin felt like it was holding its breath. Rebecca sat in the galley, barely blinking, staring into the stainless steel sink like it held answers. Her stomach was in knots. She had worked for SkyPulse for 7 years, built her reputation from nothing, trained hard, memorized protocol. She knew how to handle celebrities, royalty, even the weird crypto-millionaires who brought iguanas and Louis Vuitton bags. But today, she made a mistake. So basic, so damaging, it made her question everything she thought she knew about people and herself. Simone had gone quiet again, flipping slowly through a thick folder she pulled from her bag. Inside were diagrams, proposals, engineering drafts. Ethan passed by, glanced down, and recognized the logo. Grant Dynamics. She wasn't just rich. She built things. She invented things. Ethan hesitated by her seat. Dr. Grant, I just want to say what happened wasn't okay, and I'm sorry you had to deal with that. You don't owe me an apology, Simone said, her voice low but firm. But you saw it. That matters. Simone didn't look up. You didn't do it. Still, she closed the folder, finally met his eyes. You ever get tired of pretending like stuff didn't just happen? Ethan nodded. Every day. Simone gave a small half-smile. Then you'll do all right. Just then the cockpit door cracked open. The pilot stepped out, tall, older man in his late 50s, Captain James Whitaker. He cleared his throat. Dr. Grant, could I speak with you for a moment? Of course. They walked toward the back, where there was a private conference room with tinted windows and soundproof walls. Ethan followed and held the door, then closed it behind them. Captain Whitaker sat across from her at the table. His face was calm but serious. I just got off headset with HQ. They confirmed everything. Rebecca's actions, well, there's no gray area here. Skypulse's legal team is already prepping a response. I'm not surprised, Simone said. He exhaled slowly. I've been flying for 32 years, never seen anything like what just happened. We owe you a formal apology, and Rebecca will be grounded the second we touch down. But Simone leaned forward slightly. That's not enough. Whitaker looked at her carefully. What are you asking for? I'm not just a passenger, she said. I'm the majority shareholder now. I bought controlling interest in Skypulse last month. This jet is registered to my holding company. That's not a footnote. That's structure. And I don't tolerate disrespect in my house, she added, her voice steady but laced with authority. She placed the folder on the table. This is what I was working on mid-flight. A new equity policy, comprehensive retraining, company-wide restructuring on internal bias, enforcement, transparency, and hiring oversight. I was planning to roll it out next month. Whitaker sat straighter. I think it's time we push it forward, she said. Immediately. Immediately, he nodded. You've got my support. I know I do. And I expect every crew member to be held to the same standard, starting today, she said, her eyes locking onto his. Back in the cabin, Rebecca stood up when she saw the conference room door open. She tried to look composed, but her eyes gave her away. She watched Simone step back into the aisle. Captain Whitaker followed behind her, face unreadable. Simone walked past Rebecca slowly, didn't speak, but just before she returned to her seat, she paused, turned slightly, and said over her shoulder, You don't know who you're talking to. That's the whole problem. Rebecca didn't respond. Couldn't, because there was nothing left to say. Her heart pounded, her career flashing before her eyes as Simone's words cut deeper than the slap ever could. But the silence had changed. Now it was waiting. For landing, for fallout, for reckoning. The flight had 1.5 hours left. But for Rebecca, it already felt like it was over. She didn't know if she should stand, sit, cry, or disappear. Her mind was spiraling, replaying the slap. The way Ethan had looked at her, the stillness in Simone's face. The captain hadn't said a word to her since he returned from the meeting. That scared her more than anything. She peeked toward the front of the cabin. Simone was back to her folder, calm, focused, as if none of it had happened. Rebecca finally stood up and walked over. Dr. Grant! Simone didn't respond. I know you don't owe me anything, but Can I say something, please? Slowly, Simone closed her folder and looked up. I'm listening. Rebecca stood with her hands clasped in front of her. I messed up bad, and I don't have an excuse. I judged you. I treated you like you didn't belong, and I didn't even stop to question why I assumed that. Her voice trembled, tears threatening to spill as she forced herself to meet Simone's gaze. Simone stared at her for a moment, then nodded, once, slowly. I appreciate the honesty, she said. Rebecca's voice cracked. I know I've lost my job. I know that's coming. I just wanted you to hear it from me before the paperwork shows up. Simone tilted her head. What's your name, Rebecca? Rebecca Lawson. How long have you been in this job? 7 years. Before that, I worked for a smaller charter company out of Bend. Did regional flights, lots of wedding parties, and finance bros. Simone leaned back. So, you've seen all kinds of people? Yes. And still, I walked on this plane in a hoodie and sneakers, and your first thought was that I didn't belong. Rebecca looked down. Yes. Simone didn't raise her voice. She didn't lecture. She just looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You didn't just see me. You saw who you expected me to be." Rebecca nodded. "I was wrong," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix this. I'll never make that mistake again." "You'll have time to prove that," Simone said, and then turned back to her folder. Ethan, watching from the side, stepped closer after Rebecca walked away. He leaned in and whispered, "You're letting her keep the job." "No," Simone said without looking up. "She'll be removed from flights and put on leave immediately." Ethan waited. "But if she completes the full retraining program, owns her mistake publicly, and earns her way back, through actions, not words, then maybe there's a future." Ethan smirked. "That's fair. It's not about fairness, it's about accountability. And it's about making sure no one else feels the way I did today," she added, her voice firm. Just then, the seatbelt sign chimed. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent in about 15 minutes. Weather in Boston is partly cloudy, 62 DGF. Cabin crew, prepare for landing." As the crew scrambled to finish their final checks, Rebecca sat back down and stared straight ahead. Not in fear now, but in reflection. Simone stared out the window, watching the clouds part below. Some people get their lesson in silence, others get it in front of a camera, but the ones who grow, they listen either way. And this wasn't the end, it was the beginning of what came next. The jet touched down at Boston Logan International just after 4:05 p.m. Smooth landing. No applause, no relief, just quiet tension. On the tarmac, a black SUV waited near the private terminal. 2 security agents in plain clothes stood near the vehicle, scanning the scene, professional and calm. They weren't there for Simone's protection. They were part of her team. Rebecca unbuckled from her jump seat, feeling her knees shake slightly as she stood. She watched Simone stand, gather her things, and move slowly toward the exit. No urgency, no rush, just deliberate calm. At the top of the stairs, just before stepping off the plane, Simone paused. She turned back toward Rebecca, who was still standing near the galley. "You have a voice," she said. "You work in a place most people never get access to. Use that position for more than just assumptions." Rebecca opened her mouth to speak, but Simone didn't wait. She walked down the stairs and into the SUV. The door closed. Gone. Ethan looked over at Rebecca, arms folded. "You okay?" "I don't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He gave her a look. "It's not about being okay. It's about what you do now." Rebecca nodded, biting her lip. "Do you think I can fix this?" Ethan sighed. "Depends. You trying to save your job or change who you are?" Rebecca didn't answer, not right away. Her eyes followed the SUV as it pulled away, a knot tightening in her chest. Back at the Sky Pulse headquarters in Boston, Simone walked straight from the SUV to the boardroom. 6 executives were already seated, shuffling papers, looking nervous. She dropped the folder on the table. Effective immediately, Rebecca Lawson is off active duty, put her into the mandatory realignment program. One exec spoke up. "There could be PR fallout. We can spin this, say she misunderstood." Simone cut him off. "No spin, no press release, no cover-up. What happened is what happened. And we're not hiding from it," she added, her voice commanding the room. Another exec asked, "Should we prepare a media response?" Simone sat down at the head of the table. "No," she said, "we prepare new leadership standards." They went quiet. "I don't care how uncomfortable it makes people. We don't change the culture here by hiding mistakes. We change it by holding the mirror up and saying, that's what we were, and here's who we're becoming." One of the assistants scribbled notes furiously. Simone looked out the window of the boardroom. The plane was still visible on the far end of the tarmac. Her name was now printed under the Sky Pulse logo. The slap wasn't the real story. the silence after it was, and how people chose to break it or not. But for Simone, silence was no longer acceptable. 3 weeks later, Rebecca sat alone in a Sky Pulse training room in Somerville. No makeup, no uniform, just jeans, a sweater, and a notebook half filled with scribbles and regrets. She watched a training video on implicit bias. Real stories, real footage, not corporate fluff. A passenger describing being treated like baggage. A pilot talking about being questioned at his own hangar. A child asking her mom why they look scared when I sit next to them. And then the screen faded to black. A new face appeared. Simone, straight to camera, calm, clear. "If you're watching this, it means you work for a company that I now lead," she said. "And that means we hold each other to a higher standard." Rebecca sat up straighter. Her hands trembled as Simone's voice filled the room, each word a reminder of the moment that changed everything. Simone continued, "It's not about perfection. It's about accountability, about asking yourself one hard question every day. Did I treat someone better today because I finally saw them for who they are, not who I assumed they were?" The video ended. Rebecca closed her notebook and stared at the wall, not because she was lost, but because finally she was starting to see the direction she needed to face. Across the country on another flight, a young black woman boarded a jet in San Diego. She wore sneakers and a hoodie. The flight attendant, an older white woman, smiled and said, "Welcome aboard, Dr. Morgan. Would you like sparkling water or still?" No tension, no second guessing, just respect. The world doesn't change in one day or one flight or one slap, but it starts with the people who choose to stop pretending they don't see what's right in front of them. Sometimes it takes being humbled to finally understand what it means to lead. And sometimes the people you underestimate the most are the ones already flying higher than you can imagine. If you've ever been misjudged based on how you look, what you wear, or where you're from, this story is for you. And if you've ever been the one doing the judging, it's not too late to change. Treat people right before you know their title. Because real power doesn't announce itself, it just walks in quietly and sits wherever it wants.